Flint, welcome back to the Land Podcast. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me, Jake.
Yeah, it's a pleasure here. I know we've stayed in touch here since we kind of got connected here. And when we posted your podcast, I can't remember what number it was off the top of my head, but I had a lot of people reach out, and that episode resonated with a lot of different people. And so I'm excited to have you back here. But before we get into all that, go ahead and reintroduce yourself.
My name is Flint Koch. I've been buying and selling land for probably about the last 5 or 6 years now, and happy to share what little bit I know on Jake's podcast.
Yeah. And so you live in Missouri, right?
Yeah, kind of East Central Missouri.
East Central Missouri. And that first episode kind of broke down some of your first farms that you bought and everything else. And we'll kind of revisit some of those things. But I wanted to dive right into things. So right now, someone's listening to this podcast, and you've bought some parcels over the years, and you also have a big multifamily portfolio as well. So just explain that here a little bit, and then I'm going to ask a question of what you would tell someone that wants to buy their first piece.
When I was younger, I started a tree business, and I did that for about 5 or 6 years, and it made pretty good money, but I realized I wanted to get out of it. So me and my wife started buying rental properties to get passive income to be able to get into something else. And we hit the rental properties hard for
What year
about 3 years.
what year did you buy your first rental property?
It was, I guess, 18, probably 2018.
Okay. Yep.
So in the last 5 years, we bought about 200 rental properties. And in the same time, I was buying and reselling farms to help pay for the down payments. And then, so we had about 200 rental properties the first of this year. And then first year, rates going up. And I told my wife, we'd bought about 500 acres in Missouri that we were wanting to keep. And I told my wife, I said, let's sell some of these rental properties and pay them farms off so we're not stuck making payments all the time. And so we listed probably 30 or 40 units or more, probably 50 units, and like almost all went our contract the first day. I couldn't believe what people were paying for it. So that's what we've done this year. We've sold probably 40 or 50 rental units.
Was that kind of trickled throughout the year, or did you list all those 30 or 40 kind of all at once? And what was that time frame?
Yeah, we sold a 30 unit apartment complex the first of the year, and then we've sold maybe 20 more since then.
So that's a lot.
Once I seen what people were paying, I was like, I'll keep selling them, because a lot of them had doubled in value. I'd fix some of them up and raise rents. And so we sold enough now to pay off the 2 farms in Missouri we wanted to keep. And I had a farm in Illinois, but we got it under contract to sell. So kind of getting rid of some bad debt and getting some bigger lines of credit on the properties we're paying off to be able to do more in the future.
How nervous were you last year to seeing rates continuing to rise? I guess, it's December 22nd today, but as those rates climbed, were you getting nervous, or did you feel like you had enough financial moat that you're like, we're still good because you had so much equity in all these parcels? You're like, man, this kind of eats cash flow.
Yeah, I felt good about what we had. I wasn't worried about us just because we were sitting pretty good. We had pretty good cash flow on the rentals. I was more worried about what the market's going to do a year from now on high rates. Nobody's buying. How soft is the market going to get? But it's done probably better than I expected.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a general consensus from everyone, and I think there was a lot of uncertainty from everyone, and I still think there's a level of uncertainty right now if you ask enough people. But I want to get your perspective on this too, because everyone's assuming rates are going to drop here in March when the Fed has their next meeting. But
yeah,
it's almost getting priced into the market before it really does happen, and I'll be curious to see what really does transpire. But I think, a couple months ago, people were nervous about interest rates. And now my perception of conversation I've had is people are like, well, rates are going to drop and, things are going to pick up again. And what do you think about that?
Yeah, they may be doing it more just for consumer confidence too. Just get everybody excited. I know I talked to my banker yesterday and he's like, yeah, we're excited about next year. We're wanting to do a bunch of loans and we're ready to, because they've been kind of conservative for the last year or two. So it was good to see them excited. I think I think whatever rate drop we can get will definitely help. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the bottom as far, it's not really went down any, but I don't see it coming down any. If prices didn't drop with the high rates, I don't see them, changing a whole lot. I have some more single family homes and stuff like that because I think the housing shortage is going to be a big thing in the future. So I just assume be into a lot of real estate there. So that's kind of my play too.
Yeah, that's it. Man, sometimes I wish we knew the answers for sure because it would make decisions a lot easier. But I think that could be very true. And I think there's so much uncertainty in this election year, and that I think that maybe has people stop making decisions sometimes throughout the year because whatever side you are on the aisle, you're still kind of waiting for the election. So I think 2024 should be really fun and interesting. But I guess diving into some of these things, and you have a lot of different experience in different forms of real estate. But I'm calling you up and I'm saying, hey Flynn, I want to buy my first farm. I have $20,000 to $50,000 saved up, maybe 20. Let's say $25,000 to $75,000 saved up. I have just a house. And would you suggest that person? Because I get this question all the time. Should I buy a multifamily or like a duplex or something first, and have that cash flow, and then save up again and buy a farm, like a recreational parcel, like something, I don't know, 20 to 40 acres, or just go buy the farm first, or is it just person specific on what their skill sets and goals are?
Yeah, it's gonna be person specific because if you love the stock market, you're probably better off investing in stock market and then investing in land. But like I enjoy, investing in housing and apartments, so it's easy for me. So if you want to do rentals, then I would definitely do rentals before the land because the rentals you can buy them, put renters in them, fix them up a little bit, and then refinance them, get most of your money back, and then you
Mhm.
got your property, going up in value. The renters paying it down. But if you go and buy your land first, you're gonna be stuck in that payment. You're probably
Mhm.
not gonna do both. So I would do the investment property first and then do the land second. And
And if
for
I
us, it
remember
worked
right,
out
that's
well.
kind. And if I remember correctly, you guys bought a bigger piece, and then you end up selling that parcel to go buy more multifamilies. Is my memory right on that?
Yeah, that's how we
Like
started.
way
And
back in the
me,
day. Yeah.
yeah, that's how we started. We had a little piece paid off, so we sold it and got rentals. And then while we are buying rentals, I was also flipping land.
Mhm.
So, but that's what I would do. I
Yeah.
would buy the investment properties first, and then
Mhm.
put the land off a little while. But for us, buying the rental properties first, we've been able to pay off what we're keeping from the
Mhm.
rentals. Because to me, it's easy to sell 50 units, pay off my bad debt, and just go buy 50 more units to replace them
Mhm.
than if you didn't have the units to sell it all.
So you categorize bad debt as this land payments with low income on those parcels?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
and I
Yeah,
mean,
that's yeah. Go
if you,
ahead.
as long as you buy it right, if you buy it right and do work on the properties, we all know that's going to do well for you. But it's more
Mhm.
risky, of course, than having a property with the renter in it making the payments, paying all the
Mhm.
bills for you.
Yeah,
So
yeah, definitely two different beasts. And this would be interesting. So you've bought in both forms of real estate asset classes. Which one do you think is more competitive, buying land or buying multifamilies?
they're pretty close to the same.
Really?
I can probably get better deals on multifamilies probably.
Why do you think that
Land's tough
is?
to find deals. I don't know. I mean, I've gotten a good name when I was buying a lot of rental properties. I gotten a good name for buying, so people would just call me and say, "Hey, I
Mhm.
want to sell this," and so I was getting a lot of deals for a while like that. Land, it's tough. I'll go 4 to 6 months right now, like watching 4 to 5 states before I'll pull a
Yeah.
trigger on a really good deal. So it
Mhm.
can take a while to find a good deal on land sometimes.
Yeah. And I think that I agree with that 4 to 6 month, and I'm not looking at 4 states, but I think there's a silver lining there though, because I think you're saying 4 to 6 months, not really that long of a time when you think of someone that has been saving up to buy a piece. Maybe they've been working on getting in a position to buy something for 2 years or 3 years. To try to find the right piece, 4 to 6 months really isn't that long. But
Yeah,
I think there's some people that end up waiting 2 to 5 years and they never buy
yeah,
anything because they're like, well, that's way too
yeah,
much because they can remember when they first started looking. How do you combat
yeah,
that? I'm sure you're savvy enough to say like, okay, this is the market base in 2018, for example, and like now in 2023, 2024, like this is like the floor, or this is where things should be. Have you have you had to look back in the rearview mirror, and have you had any regrets?
yeah. Of course, I missed millions of dollars by not buying more.
Yeah,
But we
right.
didn't know we
Yeah.
didn't know the stuff across the state would double in value either.
Uh-huh.
So it was usually I didn't buy more because I didn't have the money to buy more. You only do what
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah.
But the last few years you couldn't have messed up. So
Yeah. And so,
it's just
with
good.
that being said, because I do agree with that. Like these last couple of years have been, if you bought at a good time, like it would have been really hard to mess up. And so
Yeah.
going forward, do you think that is just the world of real estate, or do you think that people should be a little bit more cautious if the market is shifting? Because right now, to your point, you were still able to sell your real estate portfolio very quickly and fast. Regardless of what all the headlines said throughout 2023.
Yeah. I think like I don't look at anything I don't wait for appreciation. I buy everything and force appreciate it. So I'm going to buy something 500
Mhm,
to $1,000 an acre undervalued. So I don't really worry too
mhm,
much about what's going to happen. I just get a really good buy and I can turn it in 2 months if I want to. If I want to hold it 2 to 6 years, whatever it is, and enjoy it, and more money I
mhm,
do. But I buy everything for a great price, and I don't really worry about anything else.
mhm.
I just get a really good deal, do work to it, and get it for it's a lot nicer property than when I bought it.
Mhm. And so, so you're focusing on value add, and I know last time we talked about some things that you do in order to do value add on that. But refresh my memory of what are you have a, let's just say, an 80-acre parcel. It's 60 acres timber, 20 acres of rough tillable, and it had been in the same family for, let's say, a long time, and there hasn't really been much done to it. So like it is what it is. Like there hasn't been much infrastructure or improvements. It's a very raw piece of 80 acres. But what's one of the
Yeah.
first projects you're going to consider to do?
Hopefully it's got like water on it, like a lake, a pond, or a river, something like that. And I would clean that up if you can get an access down the river or around a pond, clean it up. I do that first. Obviously, put in food plots. Probably put up a corn feeder if you can, and start getting as many deer pictures as you can. Put a walking trail around the property, just a chainsaw. You can do a lot of work with a chainsaw and make it better. And stuff like that will definitely help. But my value add, honestly, is just buying it right. Like
Hmm.
if you just watch the market hard, like I look every day, probably an hour a day, every day for the last 10 years. Like I don't miss
Hmm.
a day. And you can get some great deals just by really bad realtors or people that really come down way more than anybody thought they would.
Hmm.
So I buy it just on getting really good deals. And I
Yeah.
mean, I just look online. I'm not doing anything special. I'm not direct mailing or anything. I just look for great deals. I make offers, stupid offers sometimes. But when somebody comes down 80,000, you know, you don't have to do much value add there to have a really good deal on something.
Hmm. How? Um, so let's talk about. Okay, let's walk through that type of example. There was a piece that was listed. It's been on the market for. I mean, a lot of them are 6-month listing agreements, so it's been listed for 5 months and 25 days. Just for this fun fictitious example, and you think it's priced, let's say, 10% over market. Obviously, you want to get it maybe 10 to 15% below what you think it might be worth. Do you just write an offer, and do you add a letter? Do you add any information for the agent to go back, or like what's that dialogue like of like this is what we're offering and it's a firm offer?
Usually it's just a basic offer, when close in a month, we'll have financing, bank financing, and we'll just make the offer. If that counter comes back like halfway down, if they
Hmm.
meet me in the middle, I know they're probably gonna make a deal like 70% of the time. They'll probably come the rest of the way. So
Hmm.
I'll counter just a little bit higher and see. Not always, but we got a farm in Illinois I bought 3 years ago. It was a terrible listing. It was you didn't even know where at in the state it was. It had no aerial. All it had was a couple of deer pictures on the ground and a picture of a tree, and that was it. And I'd seen
Uh-huh.
it, and it was fair price, but no crazy deal. But it had a really good pinch point in the middle. Once I got the realtor to send me, I was like, well, that could be a really cool farm. Decent part of the state. It was the southern part,
Hmm.
and we bought it, but they came down about $80,000, and they'd been
Hmm.
on the market for almost 2 years. So I was like, oh, they'll come down. So I offered. They come halfway. I said, no, I'm still here. They came down, and we bought it. So I knew I had it way cheaper than it was probably worth, and it
Hmm.
had really big timber. So a buddy of mine, I showed it to him, and we went halves on it, and we held it 3 years. And we it wasn't the prettiest farm. It was like a river bottom farm. It was all woods. We logged the front half, and so it didn't look real pretty. And we made
Hmm.
about 60,000 logging it, but we just had it about 3 years. Shot about $9 off it, and the hunting was really
You guys
good.
did really
And
good
we
down there. Yeah, you guys did really
yeah
good
we
down
did
there.
yeah I killed a really big one down there this year, and the hunting was great. And I put out a lot of trail cameras, just cheap ones on video mode, and put out a ton of them. I had hundreds of pictures on files on my laptop, and I
Hmm.
killed that big buck down this year. On Facebook, a realtor I knew down there called me. He's like, "Hey, do you want to sell that farm?" I said, "Yeah, I think we're going to. We're looking to make our money on it and leave." And he's like,
Hmm.
"Okay, I got somebody to buy it." And sure enough, he showed it, and they bought it for what we asked for it. And that was just kind of a
Wow.
typical deal. We lowballed them. It was a place that the realtor had done a terrible job listing. It sat on market
Hmm.
a couple of years. People wanted to get out of it, so they came down, and we put food plots in, ran trail cameras. We didn't do much besides put food plots in and ran cameras. And the markets went
Hmm.
up, but we did really well on that property. It was almost 300 acres, and we made over $1,000 an acre. We flipped it. So a
Hmm.
place like that, if you can just buy it right, do work to it, you can do really well when you go to sell
Hmm.
it.
Yeah, and you got to enjoy it for those 3 years too. And you guys shot a bunch of good bucks and had a lot of fun there too. I mean, that's
Yeah.
whatever that value is worth too. I mean, that's something worth considering for sure. And
Yeah. It's
And it
definitely better than run around on public land. I know that. So
Yeah, and I think sometimes when people hear that, they just think that couldn't happen to me, or like that's too good to be true, or you got lucky. And that is a very to me, like hearing that, like if you do enough due diligence, like would you say that's attainable for anyone that's willing to put in the work and learn the market and put an offer in?
oh yeah, I do it multiple times a year, but that's where it comes down to looking every day,
Mhm,
every day of the year, you know. And so eventually, you know, I buy 3 or 4 deals like that a year, you know, they're just
mhm,
way underpriced or a bad listing, or
mhm.
I'll go look at it and realize it has a really nice feature. Like I bought one farm. It was in the middle of the market. It was not a deal at all, but it had a beautiful view and access to a really nice river. And the realtor had never even went there to take pictures. So you didn't even know that. And then so I bought it for 3,000 an acre and resold over half of it for 6,000 acre just because it was such a nice property. You know, the realtor didn't even, so me just going and putting boots on the ground and checking out this farm
Mhm,
really showed me how much of a nicer place it was.
mhm.
So just doing the work, looking online all the time and looking at properties, you can really find some real gems out there if you're
Yeah.
hustling and looking for them.
Was that Missouri?
Yeah, that was only about an hour from my house in Missouri.
Gotcha. And so, and I have, to kind of formulate my thoughts here, I have two different thoughts. First one being is I think there's a lot more sophisticated agents. I really think so, like the ones that are actually marketing these parcels well. Do you think that these type of opportunities are going to continue to decrease as not to pick on any agents, but like a lot of times they're older and they're not up on a lot of the technology and how to market a property. Do you think that ages out eventually, or do you think that there's always just going to be the bottom level of marketing on these parcels and there'll be these opportunities, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there'll probably be always opportunities because somebody's always got a brother-in-law's friend that they're just going to have use something. That guy, well, he hasn't really sold any real estate in 5 years, but he has his license, so he does it. But like that
Yeah.
piece I bought that was on the Beautiful View, that was the guy listed was the owner of a huge real estate company. Like he
Mm,
should have done a better job, you know. But
yeah.
yeah, I like buying them from realtors that do a sloppy job if they even go out there, and then sell them through realtors that do a great job. You know, that in
Hmm.
itself, you know,
Hmm.
you can really do well on a property.
Yeah, which is even crazy that just posting a deer that you shot and then someone reached out because I have buyers all the time too. Like if you find something like this, let me know. And then I always go through my
Yep.
mental catalog, like, well, who do I know that would potentially sell and what do they have, and try to match that
Yep.
up too. So I think as a buyer, it's not a bad idea to call agents and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. I'm very serious. I've been pre-approved, or I know I can get pre-approved for X amount, and this is what I'm looking for. If you find something, let me know, because a lot of times something like that could happen, and I'm sure they got that piece in Illinois. They're probably ecstatic to have it now, and it's just a win-win for everyone.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. It's a really nice property, and they'll be really happy with it.
Yeah. So what you mentioned the four states, so I have to guess. I mean, I think I could probably guess the four states. I don't know if you want to share the four states you're looking at every day, but um, if you want to share that, that's fine. Otherwise, I can guess, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, and you can lie to me if you want to.
No, I look at Missouri where I live, and then Illinois, Iowa, and Kansas.
Yeah. Okay. Out of those four states, what has you most excited? Obviously, Missouri's nice because you know the backyard and you know that market probably the best. But what out of those four, what has you most excited for, let's say, the next 10 years?
I'm really looking into Kansas hard. I just bought 500 acres there. And my
Nice.
opinion with that is like you want to buy a good hunting farm in Illinois, it's probably going to cost you around like 4 to 5 thousand an acre. North Missouri, same thing, 4 to 5 thousand an acre. Iowa, you know, it's even more than that, it's 6, 7 thousand an acre. But Kansas, you know, I picked up 500 acres for under 2,000 an acre, and it,
Hmm.
it looks phenomenal. You know, I didn't shoot any deer on it this year, but I've got several 140s, 150s, in another year. You know, it's really going to be good. And for buying a property like that for 2,000 an acre, and Kansas, in my opinion, is one of the top three in the nation for
Hmm.
producing big deer. And you can get landowner tags, so it's guaranteed, unlike Iowa. And you know, I can sell that farm for high twos, do really well on it one day after I hunt it and enjoy it,
Hmm.
and do really well on it. And that's still pretty affordable, in my opinion. You might have to drive farther. You know, Kansas
Hmm.
is away from a lot of people, but that's where I'm looking to harder now than I was before,
Yeah, for
just because
sure.
it's more affordable.
Yeah, and that's a theme I've had with a lot of like a lot of guys are that same dialogue that you just shared, and I would agree with that. Walk if you don't mind, like walk through how you found that deal, what made you want to buy it, and anything else. Because depending on what part of Kansas that is, we just had Jeff Simpson on here. He's an agent in Kansas, and he kind of gave us the 101 on the state because it's very diverse, and there's a Iowa to Kansas is, and depending on what part of the state, it's drastically different. Missouri to Kansas, I think, is quite a bit different depending on what part of the state. So, what what was your due diligence process? How'd you find the deal, and what made you want to buy it?
So I've been looking at Kansas for years now. Never bought there. I've hunted there a lot. Never bought there, so I knew the market really well. I was looking for something around 2,000 acre or less, and I felt like I could do really good on that. I was coming back from Alaska, got on a plane, and finally got service from hunting, and started scrolling through Land Watch, and I seen this farm, and it was just a couple pictures from the ground. It was cedars, tall prairie grass, and it was basically listed as pasture, and it was about
Mm-hmm.
2,000 an acre. And as soon as I got service, I called the realtor, and he just listed that day, and he's like, yeah, I got a bunch of calls. It'll sell quick. And I said, I imagine it will. It's in the South Central. It's by Medicine Lodge. So
Mm-hmm.
Central State, Unit 16. Unit 16 is a pretty good unit.
Yep.
So I thought it'd be pretty good. I asked him about deer, and he's like, oh, yeah, you can kill 160s, 170s here if you just
Mm-hmm.
don't shoot the 140s. I said, well, that
Right.
sounds good. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll put a full price offer on it, just contingent on me looking at it. He's like, okay. So drove out there as soon as I got home, looked at it. It looked just like I thought. With all the map stuff, nowadays, you can get a pretty good idea
Yeah.
on what's surprised anymore when I look at a place. So I got there, it looked good, and I said, yep, sounds good to me. We'll take it. It had on it, so it had a lease until that ended in November. Well,
Mm-hmm.
the ground right behind it that bordered it, the first piece was 350. The ground that bordered it had been for sale for years, but a fire went through there and a drought when they took pictures like 2 years ago. They never updated the pictures.
Mm-hmm.
There, and I'm like, well, that's that farm for sale. It back better than the pictures. The pictures look like desert, like it looked bad. So that farm looks pretty good, and they were priced about 2,000 acre. So I thought, well, I got the piece beside, and the piece I just bought looked so much nicer. It had cedar trees, CRP grass that was there. The cows had tromped it down, but you could tell it's gonna come back nice. It had a big lake in the middle of it. So I thought, if
Mm-hmm.
I put them two pieces together, the first piece I bought is going to bring the value of the other one up so much higher.
Mm-hmm.
So we got the other
Mm-hmm.
one. We just closed on it about a month ago, and we paid about 1,700 an acre for it. So if I go out there and put up some tower stands, put up some feeders, some food plots, hold it a couple years, I think that property is going to be worth, high twos in my opinion. So
Yeah.
we'll do really well and enjoy it for a few years until we're tired of driving that far.
Yeah, and even maybe even more because I think I feel that this is me being candid. Is that Kansas? I think is going to see a major influx of out-of-state hunters buying recreational parcels, and I think that we're obviously you could argue that that's happened for a long time, but I think that's going. I think that's getting accelerated much faster, and wherever we are at on the bell curve, we are definitely on the front end of the bell curve right now, and that's just my gut feeling. And I don't. Do you agree with that, or what are your thoughts?
Oh yeah. Yep, I agree. That's why I'm buying there. But I
You're
so
right.
many people are coming from the South. Like I've sold 4 farms
Yes.
in Illinois, and every one of them, is Florida, Alabama, Arkansas, come from South. And same way in Kansas. People I've talked to in realtors, it's out of state buyers. And
Hmm.
I'm an hour from a pretty big, airport where people can fly in and have a ranch and hunt. So yep, I feel like they would rather just go there. If they're going to travel that far, they're going to go somewhere where they can afford more ground for the same price. Because it's getting to where all you can afford in Illinois and Iowa is just like 100 acres. It's getting so high in a lot of them better areas.
Yeah, and if someone's happy, this for example, like shoot a 150, it's like well, you can spend $2,000 an acre to potentially shoot a 150, or you can pay $5,000 an acre to potentially shoot a 150. And so, like, I
Yeah.
think anyone with a little bit of thought, there, well, where's the cost benefit of paying more to maybe shoot the same caliber of deer? And so
Yeah.
the one thing that I find interesting with Kansas is the income. So obviously here in Illinois, I mean, with CRP, cash rent, and everything else, and even timber value is substantially higher than what I would say Kansas is. This is just me looking at it. Did these parcels have income, or is there a way to get income on that you're considering?
No, it had a lease, and they had a 30-acre crop field, but the lease on it is so cheap. It's like $30 a year or $30 an acre. So it's not even
Hmm.
hardly worth mentioning. I thought about maybe having somebody cut the hay off of some of the flat areas and getting a
Hmm.
little income there. But I only look at the income on these properties when I sell them. Like I don't worry too much about. Usually, if they have the
When you have
income, they're going to
it.
sell
Hmm.
so much higher. It's not even, it's not even worth it. Now, one thing I do like about Kansas, I've looked into, is if you had 1031 once or twice, flip a couple properties, and you buy a piece in Kansas, Kansas wants to enroll stuff in WRP, the Wetland Reserve Program, where Illinois and Missouri, they got so many people lined up, it's hard to get in. But Kansas, they're like, yeah, we'll take you immediately. We'll start the paper. So if you flipped a farm once or twice and bought a big piece in Kansas that had the right soils, you could, if they're paying 2,000-3,000 an acre on WRP, and you roll into it with some money down, you can pay your farm off. So that's kind of what
Mm.
I'm looking for. I can't find the right piece that has the right soils, but I would love to do that. If you can just flip once or
Hmm.
twice and then head to Kansas and get the right place, they can enroll in WRP and just pay farm off, and then you're done. And then make it better for
Yeah,
hunting anyways. It
yeah,
may take some time, but you'll have a lot of cover then.
Yeah, you have a farm, basically free and clear at that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you
So
think?
that's one way of getting income. But as far as getting row crop money and CRP income stuff like that, I really don't look at it because it just costs so much more. I just look at
Mhm.
buying it for a really good price is what I worry about the most.
Yeah, which is good to ask because I think that question as a buyer from no matter where they're at, and it's probably just more prevalent guys from the Midwest going to Kansas. But to me, I think that's probably just one mental hurdle that people have is like, you can spend, for example, $1 million and get zero income, or you can spend $1 million in a different state and get maybe a 2% return or 3% return.
Yeah.
But that's not your goal. Your goal is to enjoy it and hunt it and have fun and,
Yeah.
do that value add.
Yeah. And I've always went back. If I look at it, a good return, I don't find it in land. I just go, if I want to return, I just buy an apartment complex. And that's always my theory.
True.
Like I don't plant walnuts in the bottoms and I don't do stuff like that to get a return in 30 or 50 years. I just buy an apartment complex, and I kind of keep them
Yeah.
two things separate, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it depends on what your goals are, and I think there's some people that do buy a piece and they will hold it for 20 or 30 years, and those projects do make sense. But that's definitely something to consider. What do you? So I mean, I think you kind of hit on some of this stuff, but what factors do you consider when identifying a potential land investment? Is it? It's simply just buying it right. Is kind of what I'm gathering.
Yeah, that's what I look at and I worry about the most is just about right. I'm not gonna buy something that's been logged really hard. Like if it's in a southern part of Missouri that's not very popular and it's been logged hard, they're almost gonna have to give it to me before I'll buy it. Because if
Hmm.
I don't get excited when I walk a property, it's gonna be hard to get somebody else excited about either.
Hmm.
So main thing is just getting a good price on something that you can really turn into a nice piece of property for the next person.
Hmm. Yeah. Do you think that would be a potential good investment though for the southern part of Missouri if it is that cheap, or is the hunting just not that great?
The hunting's okay, but I just don't like it. It's hard to really like something that's mostly rocks and it's been logged, in my opinion.
Yeah,
You almost, I
yeah.
mean, it's
If
the
you
same way.
yeah, logged with big deer, okay, I can look past that. Logged with no big deer, all right, that's gonna be that's a
Yeah,
tougher
it's a
sell
tough
for
buy.
sure.
And you can sell it, but
Yeah,
it has to be cheap, really cheap. So
yeah, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. What are some misconceptions that you think people have with buying and selling land? Like you use the term flip, but that Illinois farm, for example, you held that for 3 years, which in the eyes of the IRS, that's a long-term capital gains, not short-term capital gains. So like, what's a misconception in your mind of investing in land? Do you think that people I guess, what do you think? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I think a lot of times people think, maybe the older guys, they think that land's gonna go down to like $250 an acre they paid for it in the 70s. And I just don't think that's the case. Like I think we're in history, we're at a time where like the amount of people we have and the amount of land we have is just continuing to pass each other to where I think land, in maybe another 20 or 30 years, land's gonna be so expensive, it's just gonna be for the top 5% of people can afford it the way it's going. If it keeps at
Mhm,
this rate, uh, so I think some people screw up by thinking they're going to wait and everything's going to come down in price. And I don't see that happening. I could be
mhm.
wrong, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I think I read something, might have been yesterday or 2 days ago. It's like there's 2 types of investors. Those that think they can time the market and those who haven't figured out that they can't. So it's like they're like timing the market's impossible based off of what every savvy investor has ever done. But every person that's I don't want to generalize. A lot of people think that they have this special power. They can magically time the market perfectly and they're going to be gazillionaires because they can do it perfectly. And if you look at just other successful people or other people who have done it, like you, for example, you started buying 2018 and you're buying just like that that continued to what you could afford. Like it wasn't, you bought some, like you didn't buy anything in 2018. You're like, oh, I'm going to wait till 2025 because that's when I think
Yeah.
things are really going to go down. And so
Yeah.
I think that's a misconception some people have for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's
People
a
want to,
mistake that you've made? Go ahead.
no, never mind. It's fine.
What's a mistake that you've made on one of these parcels? Maybe you bought something and you thought, you could get this out of it or you could do this to improve it, and you're like, well, we didn't really do as well as we thought, and this is what went wrong, or any other mistakes you can think
I haven't made many really just because the market's been so good. The one mistake I did make early this year, I bought a big piece and that was the one on the river and I did really well. Well, they had another piece that went with it. And I said, well, I'll just buy that piece too because this first one went so well. And I messed up there because it didn't have electric to it. The electric about a mile away, and it's expensive to run electric. So I bought it with a plan of putting a log cabin all solar on it. Well, I get it
of.
bought, I get into it, and I realize I don't want to go to all the work. And I was like, well, I'll just sell it without doing the log cabin, and solar and stuff. And I sat on that half the year. I finally got all sold, and we did okay on it. But that was the biggest thing I did wrong, was buying something this year that did not have electric to it.
So
So
utilities are
I'll
very important to you. Like now, it's
yeah.
almost like they almost have to have utilities nearby. Is what I'm getting.
Yeah, and this place, it ended up most of it sold to deer hunters, so they didn't care as much. But in this area, I'm like an hour and a half, 2 hours from St. Louis, a big city. So most of these buyers are people looking for a weekend place. They can put a cabin, come out. They're not necessarily hunters. They're just looking for a place to get outside and enjoy it.
Hmm.
Electric was a huge turnoff to all these people. If I had electric there, it would have sold for $1,000 an acre higher than what I sold it for.
Wow.
That's how much difference it made.
Would it have made sense to run electricity? Do you think you would have been able to make money if you did run it? Like if you could have made
It
a
would have.
thousand more?
It probably would have been
Been
a
close.
wash, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's another thing too. You gotta get easements through these properties to run electric, and I just didn't think
Mhm.
that would happen either. So
Yeah, even if you did, it would be a very long process, I assume, to get that actually there.
yeah.
What was the general budget of what you thought you could build a cabin with hooked up with solar panels? I'm just curious.
I was thinking I'd be like 50,000. I found some Mennonites in Indiana that built log cabins. They looked really cool, and they bring them out and set them up, and that was my plan. But at the same time, I was
Mhm,
selling another cabin on a little lake, and it was selling like people were fighting over it. It was selling so good, but I didn't put it on a legit foundation, and that was a huge
mhm.
problem for everybody. And so I decided, I'm not going to go through all the work of pouring concrete and doing all that. So we just
Because of
decided to sell
financing?
it the way it was.
Was it
Yeah,
financing or was it just buyers objecting? Okay. Yeah.
it was just financing. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. So, what do you think and so that project, you ended up putting a cabin on that other piece then?
We did it the
Or was
first
it?
time, and we sold it, but we had to have a cash buyer for it. And then so we were in the middle of that whenever I was getting ready to start this other project, and I said, you know what, I'm not going to deal with all that. Pouring
Mhm.
concrete, doing all this stuff. We'll just sell it the way it is, and we made money on it. We just sat on it longer than I expected.
Yeah.
You know, it
Yeah.
really.
Did you have to do price
It,
reductions to get it sold, or did you just have it sit there like price? Because that's the other thing too. Is like, for example, I think there's this perception when like for someone that's looking like, oh, Flint just bought this property a year ago, he's going to make a bunch of money on this thing. But in reality, I think a lot of these folks that buy something and sell something, they're not looking to get the absolute top of market, and they're wanting to move on with it. And I think, would you agree with that? Because that's a conversation I have. So and so bought it a year ago, 2 years ago. They think they're going to make a bunch of money on it. They may make some money on it, but it's almost like there's maybe a little bit more room for negotiation there than someone that this is their great grandpa's farm and they held it forever. They had an agent list it and it's at the very, very top of the market and there's no room there. Or am I generalizing too much? Your opinion?
yeah, I mean, I guess it just depends on what the realtor's telling them and what you got into it, of course.
Sure. And so,
But
to get that property sold, did you have to reduce it, or did you have to get creative, or was it just you had to wait?
we reduced it a little, but we mostly just waited. It
Yeah.
was it was one of the deals. I thought it would sell to more recreational people that want to build a cabin, and that wasn't the case.
Hmm.
So I went out there and put in food plots, put up some tower stands, and it sold to deer hunters. So I
Hmm.
should have done that from the beginning, but I knew the recreational people would pay more, so that's what I went with first, and I kind of changed it up midway and went to the hunters again. So
Hmm.
that's what I had to do. But that was the only one I really sat on at all in the last few years.
What's something that you wish you would have done differently throughout this, let's say, the last 5 years since you started buying real estate?
I definitely would have bought a lot more houses. I know that the
Like,
housing almost tripled in value in the
uh-huh.
last 5 years here, probably. So I would have bought a lot more of those. But
Why is that part of Missouri too? Because you hear like different hot markets in Illinois. Like our population's actually going down. And I don't know. I'm not aware if Missouri's growing or shrinking, but do you think that's this lack of inventory is what drove that up? And obviously the cheap money in 20 and 21.
yeah, there's a lot of people moving here, like those people that want the cabin. Like I had multiple people out of state wanting to just move to this little cabin to live there. So a lot of people covered it. No one's really built around me in years since '08. It really hurt the contractors, and no one's really built to keep up at all.
Hmm.
And you know, a little bit of both of them, and it's just a shortage of housing is what it comes down to, I think. And no one's still building with the price of interest and the price of cost of building. No one's still building anything to speak of. So I'm still buying. I'm buying a lot of houses now just because I think the next few years they're going to keep on going up.
Hmm. Have you heard about the potential legislation to have basically hedge funds stop buying single family houses? Like they're trying to basically block BlackRock from buying more single family houses. I saw that maybe a week or two ago.
I've seen stuff about it. I didn't know they're actually trying to stop it, but it's probably a good thing because it's
Yeah.
crazy how much they're buying up.
Hmm. Yeah. Do you think that would impact your strategy if something like that did go through, or do you think that it's still just that much of a shortage that you think it's still a good approach?
I think it's just that much of a shortage. I mean, the people
Mhm,
lining up to rent places, and the rents are getting higher. And I just think if I can buy a 3 bedroom house, full basement right now for 100 out for 1,200 a month or 1,500 a month, even if when I bought rentals 5 years ago, I just bought on cash flow. I wanted to buy stuff that made money every month. And if I would have just
mhm,
bought on nicer places and nicer areas, I would have done way better than just worrying about cash flow. I
mm,
worry more about appreciation and not worry
mhm.
as much about cash flow.
Yeah, that's a really that's a really interesting takeaway from that because I think that's a. Do you think that's just a? Do you think that's just something that people getting started out they're so focused on cash flow just because they're getting started out and they maybe don't look down the road for appreciation because now you've seen appreciation firsthand and
Yeah.
now you're like okay I need to adjust my strategy.
Yeah, I went after cash flow because I was trying to get out of a job I didn't like. So I was just looking for
That's a good point.
replacement income, and it worked.
Different
But
motive.
if I was going to suggest somebody that's starting, I would say do one for one. Buy a place, a cheaper place. Some that's probably never going to be worth a lot, but it has cash flow, and then buy one that just pays the bills and a little extra. That's going to appreciate faster. I would do
Mhm.
half of each if I was starting over again completely.
Mhm. Something I picked up here talking with you here today is you mentioned like the Kansas farm's an hour away from a major airport. The other farm was like 2 hours roughly from St. Louis. How often is it important for you where you're looking to what's the nearest metro area or what is the buyer's pool? Or would you buy something in quite literally in the middle of nowhere and it's an hour and 20 minutes to the closest Walmart for
Yeah, I'm
land,
just looking.
not houses.
Yeah. So I look at all this, the states kind of vary on the area. Like, the stuff around Chicago is gonna be way higher than the stuff in Southern Illinois. I just look at the areas generally, what they're going for, and I look at what's a really good deal for that area. I don't try to go buy ground in the best part of Missouri, the northeast corner of Missouri. I don't buy ground there unless it's a great deal because I know it'll probably appreciate the fastest, but I'm not too worried about appreciation. I'm more worried about force appreciating a property. So I don't
Mhm.
worry too much about that. And I wish I mean, like the northeast corner of Missouri, it went from 3,000 an acre. The first farm I bought, I sold it for just under 3,000, and that was about 4 years ago. And now it's selling for 6 to 7. So
Mhm.
it's went up that much. And if you had land there and you want to sit on a place and not think about selling it, just enjoy it, then it's probably worth getting in the best parts of the state and let it appreciate, like
Mhm.
good real estate will do.
Mhm.
But I just buy, what's a really good deal for that area
Yeah.
is what I look for the most.
And do you think that's just because of your possible holding period? Because it sounds like most of these pieces aren't like a 10-year or 20-year-old hold. Most of these sound like 3 to 5 years roughly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the stuff like I got in North Missouri, the farm I plan on keeping, I don't plan on selling it, but every day when I'm there working on it, I'm doing stuff to make it better. So if I would want to sell it or something happens to me and my family needs to sell it, then they're going to do good on it.
Yeah.
So wherever it is, I'm just adding value to the property I have.
hmm Why don't you think there's more people that do this?
I don't know. It's like, I love it. I don't know why more people don't sign up for it, but
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think. Do you think it's people are scared, or it's the unknown, or the fear of things going wrong? Or
yeah, I think it's just the fear of having a payment to make. Maybe their wife doesn't want to make the payment. They don't agree that's a good deal, and it takes a couple of good deals before you're like, okay, this is a great thing to do. We
Mhm,
do good. I mean, you make a bunch of money on your first property you own and have it a few years, enjoy it, and sell it. You're probably going to do it again. But if you never do it and get to enjoy the property and then make money when you sell it, you know, you just got to get in there and see what it's all about. But it is scary for a lot of people to get started.
when you bought your first farm, did you? What was your goal when you? So you just signed the purchase agreement, you just closed on it, you just went and did the first project on it. Knowing that, was that something you thought you would keep for a really long time, or what was that? What was your goals getting into land? Was it to do something similar to this, or has it evolved over time?
So my first farm, I always loved hunting, but I never really had a great spot to hunt. I grew up on a farm, but it was a cattle farm, so it wasn't great hunting. So my goal was just to have a good place to hunt, and my family to have a good place to hunt. So the first year, me and my wife built a house. We paid for about half it in cash, and then so the next year we saved up what we made, paid the house off, and I said, okay, the next thing I want to do is buy a farm. So I made like the greatest mistake. I just opened up LandWatch one day, found the cheapest farm in North Missouri, and bought it. I went and looked. I was like, oh, this looks good, so I just bought it. Ended up it being in a great area, and other people wanted it for the same reason I wanted it. It was North Missouri, not too far away. It was 2.5 hours from my house, and I bought it just to have great hunting in, and it was great for us. We enjoyed it. Killed a couple bucks a year off it. We had about 5 years. While we had it, we added a cabin, added food plots, saved the trail camera pictures. never intended to sell it. We just, made it better for us. And then we decided, hey, let's sell this, make some money, and start buying rental properties, and kind of switch up the careers. That's when I sold it and we made like $80,000 on that first farm we had. And that was just kind of your typical deal. Land was slowly going up in value. We did work to it, sold it, made some money. That was kind of a typical property. We bought it for a good price. The people they come down some, and it was just a good price back then. But it was just your typical deal. We enjoyed it, added value, and I sold it. And after I sold it, I was like, man, that was pretty cool, just making money on a farm after you're hunting it a few years and
Yeah.
enjoying it. So
Yeah.
we just kept doing it.
hmm Yeah, that's really interesting, and and also really cool. And I think that's it's like out of all the guests that we've had, it's almost the common theme was they wish they would have started sooner, or they wish they just would have ripped the band-aid off and did it sooner. And
Yeah.
and I think you just if you get in the first farm right, and you it's just fun to have ground. Like, it sounds so dumb. It's like we're talking about how to make money or how to improve your whatever your goals are, but just working on the farm and hunting on your own dirt, like, to me, there is a true value of that. Like, peace and quiet is worth something to a lot of people. And so, like, to go and experience all that, like, yeah, you can't put a dollar amount on it per se, but making memories of family, that's worth something. So it's like there's a lot of things that don't go into the spreadsheet that I think improve a lot of forms of your life. That's the non-math part of the brain talking.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. We got a farm up north in Missouri, and I try to go up there once every couple of weeks. If not, I get to missing it. So I'll go up there and do projects and stuff like that. And I just enjoy working on the properties I have, and
Mhm.
it's been good to us.
What do you think? What's a mistake? Okay, so they bought a farm and there are some projects they can do. And what do you think is what would be something you wouldn't spend money on to improve a farm? Like, you talk about, like, for instance, for a house, uh, there's a stat: garage doors are the highest ROI home improvement. It was also a garage door sales place that said that stat. So I don't know how true it is, but it stuck with me. It stuck with me. So there was that, or like the kitchen, or whatever the case may be. Like, there's some areas in the house where it makes the most sense. Fresh paint is going to make a big impact. And then there's other forms where people do something to their house and they spend whatever on it, and there's not really necessarily a dollar for dollar return. What is a project for recreational land that you don't think is a dollar for dollar return, or something that might not make sense from a math standpoint?
I think the only thing I've seen that doesn't make sense is when people put big buildings. Like, I've seen people put big shops on it. I think they build them for themselves and they use them and like them. But when they sell, I've never seen that money really come back around on a big pole
Mhm.
barn, shout. It's really worth it if you got a small hunting cabin or you turn a barn or something like that into a cabin. But I think that's where I've seen where people put the money into it that they don't get it out of.
Mhm.
Anything else you do, I would rather put my money into building a lake on the property than a big building. It seems like water just draws people,
Mhm.
but the
Bigger
big
pool
buildings,
buyers.
the only, yeah, yeah. And you got to, if you put a big building on there, you're really limiting the amount of buyers that you're going to have a place. You really need to think about
Mhm.
the resale price and who can afford it.
Mhm.
But that would be the
So
only thing that really comes to mind.
mhm. So are
Everything
there,
else you
like
do, if you put in food plots, stuff like that, you'll come out on what you do there on that smaller type of stuff.
okay, that's good to know. What's the I can probably guess what this is, but what is the cheapest or free thing to do to improve the value?
I would say I said this in the last podcast, but just saving all your trail camera pictures. Running cameras
Yep.
hard. Like that farm in Illinois, we didn't do anything to that, but just added a few small food plots and just kept really good trail camera pictures. And I mean, that basically sold the farm. It was not a real pretty farm. You don't walk that farm and be like, man, I love this place. Part of it's
Mhm.
log, the rest of it's just swampy river bottoms that's floods half the year. And it was not a real pretty place. But the fact that we could prove it had big deer on it every year, and we proved that we could kill them every year, that added, just for a few $100s a year, that's well worth. That's the best bang for the buck, I think.
So trail camera data, keeping it. And here's the thing too. I think a lot of people, as historical data has become way more impactful too. As a buyer, I would be excited if I bought a farm from you and said, "Here's the last 3 years of trail cam history. Here's a deer that he was 3 years old 3 years ago, and he's going to be six this year, and this is what he's done the last 3 years." You're gonna have a higher
Yep.
odds to kill that deer as a new owner too. And I think one of those, like, yeah, some buyers might not take that into account, but there's more and more that would, and that's a free thing to do, just to be organized on it.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
That'd be a good closing gift. Here's the thumb drive of every single trail cam picture on this farm. You go have
Yeah.
fun. Good luck.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
told that realtor, I said, the guys, if they buy it, I said, just tell them to call me when they, tell me what deer they have on camera next year, middle of October, and I can tell you how to kill that deer. We just hunted enough. If you hunt these two food plots in the pinch point, you're going to kill them. Just wait till the wind's right.
Yeah.
So, and I'd be happy to do that farm and help them get going because it was just a set kind of turnkey farm. But
Hmm.
yep, trail cameras are by far the best thing to be doing. It doesn't cost much and it's enjoyable just to save good records of all of them. And I try to run a
Hmm.
camera that has a good quality picture or put on video mode so you can kind of stop it and
Hmm.
screenshot the picture, and just kind of take it serious. Because if you're looking at two farms and the one is just a farm, nothing's been done, and another one has a proven deer history with property improvements, you're naturally just going to go to the one that you know what's there.
Hmm. Yeah,
If you
especially if they're
spend that much
price
money.
similar. If they're price similar too, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you approach? How would you suggest someone to approach risk management if they're just getting started? So, like with you, I feel like you have a pretty good moat now with where you're at in the portfolio you have. But for someone that's maybe has one farm or two farms, what are some things that you would tell them to consider from a risk management perspective?
I would just, like I've been saying the whole time, just buy it right. Like just spend your time learning the market, watching the market for 6 months, and then when you buy it, you got a good deal on it. So if you have to sell it fast because you get in a tight spot or you get hurt or something, you can sell it and get all your money back and then some.
Hmm.
If you go and buy the nicest farm in that county for top dollar because it has really big deer on it and you really think it's cool, if you buy that and you get in a tight spot, you're not going to sell it and come out ahead at all. You may be selling for a loss. So as far as a risk
Hmm.
standpoint, I would say just buy it right would be the main thing. So if you need to sell it, you can sell it quickly and not get hurt at all on it. That'd be the first thing I would think of.
Hmm.
But risk
Another
doesn't
question
bother
that
me
I
too
get.
much. So
Yeah, I think I definitely can pick that up. I feel like you don't lose sleep over stuff too often, from what I can gather. So another question I get quite often, and this is so different, depending where you're at in your real estate journey or where you're at in your land buying journey. But what advice would you give someone that is looking to get their first land loan, and so or any other financing advice? Because it seems like you probably have a pretty good relationship with the bank you're at now. And so a lot of these people, they're just now establishing a potential relationship for whatever business may come down the road for them.
yeah, so what I did is I got started with a local bank, and it's a small town, smaller bank. They got a few branches, and I stay with them, and they just never told me no when I asked for more money. So I just stuck with them, and they may not be the cheapest bank in town, but but they'll always give me the money. And it's nice when you got a small bank like that because you go to a wedding reception, you can drink beer with the bank president, and they know you know their kids, and it feels like if something would happen and you need a year, if you get in a tight spot, they'd be there to help you out and say, okay, we'll tack the payments on the back end of the loan. And if you
Hmm.
need 6 months or a year or something, if you get in a tight spot, where I never felt like you're going to get that with a really big bank, you're just a
Hmm.
name on a piece of paper. Because I've
Hmm.
talked to them bigger banks before. So that's one thing I would do is just find a small local bank and just get in with them good and just build a relationship with a bank because that's a big deal if you're going to buy real estate. If your goal is to buy 400 or 500 acres one day and you're starting at 20 and you're going to flip a few times and spend 20 years to put a big piece together, which is very attainable, you're going to need a bank that says, yeah, you paid this back, loan back, and we're happy to do it for you again.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. And and those guys, they're typically very sharp, and it's good just to call them every now and then and say, "Hey, what are you seeing? What's the activity been?" And I just think you can learn a lot from a relationship like that, and vice versa too. Because I'm sure they're
Yeah.
asking you questions on what you're seeing and what do you think. So that's definitely a good piece of advice. Did you think when you bought your first piece of real estate, did you think all of this was possible when you started?
I thought the rentals were possible because to me, it's just like, well, if you can get the money to buy another one, that's why I got into rental properties because it's just like, well, if I get the money to buy, I knew it was possible to own 100 units one day or 1,000 units one day. It's just a matter of doing the work. I never thought I'd be, buying this much ground. I didn't see
Hmm.
that happening. But if you just stick with it and just keep looking for deals and keep working it, it's amazing. Like a typical person making 80,000 a year, if they just start with a 40-acre piece, buy it right, do work to it, and make a plan and say, in 10 years, I want to have 200 acres. That first 40, make it nicer, and then sell it in a couple of years, make 40,000 on it, do it again, make another 60,000 on the next piece, and just slowly flipping bigger to where your payment's not going up a whole lot, but
Hmm.
you're getting a bigger piece every time you turn it over. So
Hmm.
it's very attainable. You just need to make a plan and get after it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I think when people hear that, they think, yeah, easy. Like I just think it's the unknown. People don't realize that it really is possible. And I've interviewed a lot of guests that have done a similar path to what you're discussing, and it's like, well, here's the proof. It's like
Yeah.
I get the impression that none of these guys started with a giant advantage over the general population. So it's like, if they could do it, I hope that the purpose of this podcast is to empower everyone to realize, like, hey, if this is really a goal or you really want to do this, here's other people that have done it and here's how they did it. And I think it's cool that you kind of share your story here on this, because it's definitely inspiring and really cool just to see someone go out and win and do what they want to, what their goals were, and the goals evolve. And that's the fun part of this. Like, the process of all this is so fun. I'm sure for you, like, looking for farms, like, it's almost a form of hunting, and it's a form of just constantly learning. And it's like, I personally, like, okay, I've memorized this part of Illinois. Like, all right, now I'm going to go memorize this part of the country, go memorize this part of the country, and just continue to learn. And to me, that's fun. I might be weird for that, but I have a feeling you're kind of the same way.
Oh yeah, I love it. I can hunt deer for 2 months straight, but after that I get pretty bored or I'm ready to go back to work. But I can look for deals on land every day and never get tired of it. So I love it. So it's easy for me because I love doing it.
I assume I bet you look at LandWatch, probably Realtor, Zillow. Is there any other places where you look every day?
No, so I hit like 3 places a day. So I'll look at Zillow, the state of Missouri and Zillow, and that kind of catches the small town real estate realtors that just have a little shop, that just throw it on Zillow that wouldn't put it on the bigger thing. So I look at Zillow.
Mm-hmm.
I look at LandWatch. I like LandWatch because I can filter it, price per acre, the lowest. So I'll check out like once a week, what's the lowest in this part of the state. But I
Mm-hmm.
also check it every day on what's new. So I know every day what came on the market
Mm-hmm.
and what's it. So every day I'm looking at the state and seeing what's for sale and what's listed at. And
Mm-hmm.
so I look at those two, and I look at a couple other sites for housing, for houses and apartments for them. But the main two is Zillow and LandWatch for just checking, looking for properties every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're exactly right. Because I know, you're to get on LandWatch, it's expensive for, like, to be on the front page or front and center. And then, like, the guy that maybe only sells 2 pieces of land a year, he's not going to go do that. And they're just going to be on Zillow,
Yep.
and then vice versa. Some people on LandWatch aren't going to be on Zillow. So yeah, I do. That's definitely a good tip there. Anything else you can think of, or like any bold takes for 2024, or any personal goals of what you're hoping to achieve?
Nope, just hunting for deals. I'm pretty happy with what we got. We got our farms in Missouri about paid off, and we got the farm in Kansas. We sold the one in Illinois. So nope,
Mhm.
just looking for deals. I enjoy doing it, and so
Yeah.
always looking. Just kind of moving money around, kind of learning how to do that. 1031 and from apartments to land and or whatever you're doing to save on taxes there because that's such a big cost.
Hmm.
But this year it's just been tough this year with the interest so hot. You can think you're going to make a bunch of money on a property, but if you're paying 60,000 a year in interest, that profit goes away pretty quick. So you really got to have a good deal on something.
Hmm. Yeah, that's where I think a lot of buyers got. I talk about this with the podcast throughout the year, but it's like the guy that was shopping, let's say in 21, land was too expensive. I put air quotes there, and then they wait until 2023, and it's like, well, land didn't really drop hardly at all, maybe a point or two, depending on what part of the country, and your payment went up probably 80%. So what you can
Yeah.
afford is substantially less. So I think if rates do end up dropping, then hopefully that person can figure out, like, okay, well, land seems to be pretty stable. And to your point, like, I think there's two themes that I picked up this past year on the land podcast. Number one is just do it. Like, as elementary as that is. And number two is, like, don't overpay. Get a solid deal. You don't have to steal the farm. You don't have to get the best deal ever, but get something that is a good deal and something that, if you want to do projects, you can do. So
Yep.
that's been the takeaway there. But it'll be fun. It'll be fun to see what 2024 what happens. And um, everyone's going to ride the same wave no matter what. Like, we're all playing in the same sandbox, whether, like, interest rates are high, unless you're a cash buyer, interest rates are high for everyone. And so
Yeah.
that's the thing there, where everyone, I think, sometimes thinks their battles are just unique, but we're all kind of dealing with the same thing here. But well, no, I really, really appreciate your time here. And I can't remember, is there any place where people can follow with what you have going on, or a place where they can hit you with some questions if they want to, or if not, I can get your email and pass it along, or however you want to handle it.
Yeah, you can pass my email along. I just got Facebook, but I don't get it on very much. So you can shoot me a message through Messenger if you have a question, but that's about it. I don't have much on my phone, so I don't waste time on my phone. So
It's wise.
not much there.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it, Flint. Hope you have a great Christmas. Hope you have a great 2024. We'll have to stay in touch.